This is Crow Inquisitors, and we are here once more with another behind-the-scenes bonus look at one of our characters. Today, I have with me a blast from the past, a man I have not spoken to in a while, except through Twitter, Mr. Adam Schlesman, to talk about his character, Theo. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing great. I'm ready for it.
Awesome. Sounds good. So, Theo is one of the most interesting and evocative characters of Crow Inquisitors. Very, you either, I was going to say you either love him or hate him, but I don't think anyone hates Theo. He immediately steals the spotlight whenever he enters the room. Let's talk about Theo, shall we? So when you were thinking about making Theo as a character, what were your kind of inspirations? What made you think, I want to make this gladiator who was once a noble and then who is now struggling with his faith in the gods? Because I you know, the concept of the campaign, right, is medieval Suicide Squad. And I know I told you that before we kind of start talking about character, but I mean, yeah, where did that come from?
Well, I guess I wanted a character who kind of had almost a humble beginning, and not necessarily where he was coming off, you know, he wasn't humble as a rich guy, but kind of the general story, he was starting off humble, where everything was kind of taken away from him. And that's kind of the inspiration behind the character, is I wanted a character who, one of his main like actions was that he just kind of like dropped everything and fought, and I think that was the basis of his character, because he kind of had nothing to lose because he had already lost everything. And so everything he does is almost like a apathetic, like I have nothing to lose. Like, I'm going to go all out. And but the pre-story, he kind of did have something to lose, which was his wife, and that was taken away from him. Mm-hmm. And I think the gladiator kind of side of him was kind of this. I wanted him to constantly be a humble character, and it was kind of stolen from the Gladiator, the movie, where he was kind of betrayed and became a gladiator. Except it wasn't due to somebody's fault; it was just, circumstances where he was with his father, who he loved his father. It was something that he valued, and then his father was killed and so he washes up on shore, goes into Gladiator, and so he has nothing to lose. And through that, he actually becomes successful. And he doesn't care about the success or anything. He's just kind of like going along for the ride. Like, it's like he has nothing to lose. He goes all out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden something good comes out of it. And he's like, well, I don't really care about all that. I mean, I'll just take it, but I have nothing to lose. So I'm going to, and that fight within him was just kind of like, I'm going to try and do my best, but it doesn't matter in the end, that's kind of like a sad character, And so I wanted this almost like torment inside of him, where it was almost sad, the way he was just like, I'm going to fight, that's honorable. I'm going to die fighting if I have to. Otherwise I'm just going to, nothing matters. And then he meets his wife, and then he loses her. And so that's kind of like what's going on the whole time.
Yeah. It seems like Theo is like the ultimate in the moment character. Like, well, he does not think past the immediate moment he's in. And so he'll go all out in whatever moment he finds himself in. But then when the consequences come, when he realizes maybe what his actions caused, or maybe what not caring about his actions led to, it gets to this point where you're like, okay, do I care about the past or the future? I don't know. And I feel like that's part of Theo's whole drive is, what does he actually care about? Is he only care about the present moment, or does he, because it feels like he, at least in the first season, has this tug between the past and the future, and like, is he going to try to go back and like, is his wife what he cares about? Like, is trying to get her back what he cares about, or is moving on and like making something new something he cares about?
Well, I think he does have, he kind of has this fearless attitude, and it's because of that. And so he does have things that matter to him, but it's more like the here and now matter. Like, let's say there's something that somebody requests of him to do a good thing, like somebody's suffering, and he sees that in the moment. He doesn't have this long scale of like, this is who I want to be. It's like, oh, in this moment, I have to do a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think he doesn't kind of, it's very contradictory to who I am, because that's not necessarily who I am, because I don't think, oh, I'm just going to like, sometimes he'll do a bad thing, and they're not necessarily bad in the, to a person, to a good person, or, he doesn't kill people who are innocent, like usually, but early in his pre-story, he, goes and kills a whole bunch of people who are bad. And so on a long-term moral basis, he doesn't devalue, like, he's not like, oh, killing is evil. He just kind of is like, these are bad people, I'm going to kill them. So he doesn't have this like solid foundation of good and bad. He's just like, oh, in this moment, this is good.
Yeah, he goes with whatever his like moral gut is in the moment, not really thinking through like what maybe the means of how he's going about doing the thing that he thinks might be good or evil will actually cost him in the end.
It's really like, you know, he kind of, it's always in the moment. So he doesn't really, he doesn't think long-term of what he's doing. And that can be bad. I mean, most of the time I feel like, I mean, it can result in a good thing, which is like the gladiator thing. He's just like, I don't care. I'm going to go in. I'm going to, you know, I'm not going to think strategically. I'm just going to fight. And he ends up winning. It's like, oh, you know, this time it turned out good. And then, you know, eventually down the road, lightning is going to strike him or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to do this. He's very impulsive.
Yeah.
And so it gets him in good situations. It's just basically luck. And it's,
sure.
You know, sometimes he'll live and it's like, oh, okay, I guess that worked. But he's not like strategizing anything he's doing because he feels so like hopeless in his grand scheme of who he is in his life.
Right. Yeah. So what I like to do going through each of these characters is go through their life paths because technically we don't actually ever talk about that in the actual Crow Inquisitors, what we've recorded. And so just, you know, for the sake of if anyone who's curious about it, Theo was born noble, obviously in New Amhati. He was a courtier for 5 years after that in New Amhati still. And then as Theo said, like something happened with his father. He ended up shipwreck or something like that. Ends up on the beach in Saran and is enslaved and made to be a gladiator for 2 life paths after that, 8 years. And then after he wins his freedom by being a great gladiator, he marries his wife and becomes a temple acolyte with her, working in the wait. So something I just realized. So do you remember how in Saran, technically it's like not okay to be like, it's okay to marry if you're in the church, but you can't marry someone who's also in the church? I just realized that's a thing. So I feel like
they left and they actually left the church. He basically convinced her to not be in the church anymore so that they could get married. And that so he kind of like
makes more sense.
Overcame her like she was very dedicated, but she was like, I love him too much. And so she kind of left that, but they were still in the inner circle of the church. And that's how it kind of ended in her demise and kind of led him on his path. And I don't think he kind of like joined the church to get closer to her, but it had no, he wasn't like, oh yeah, the gods. It was just, oh, I just wanted her. It's just
that makes more sense.
Like, he didn't care anything about really anyone other than what he wanted, which is it's really selfish in what he did. But I don't think his motives was, you know, obviously she was okay with it. You know, she loved him as well. And he wasn't going to like cheat his way there. It was just kind of like, I don't have this sense of, you know, I have nothing for the gods. Like I don't care about what they do or what they think of how I'm getting what I want.
Sure.
And it wasn't, you know, he really doesn't care about anybody anybody who's just kind of like in the background. And I don't think he values humanity as a whole. He values like his family. He values his friends who are close to him. But I think that he's very insecure about that. And I think that when someone, you know, doesn't do something exactly the way he does, he feels like maybe they're going to let me down. So he knows that he kind of is very insecure about not trusting people who aren't like his immediate family. Like he's very loyal to his family though. Yeah. Like he was loyal to his father and he was loyal to his wife, you know, but when it came to his friends, he was kind of, although he could use them and actually trust them in a sense, he knew that there could be a situation where they could let him down. So yeah, that was the whole thing where with the clergy, where he kind of snuck in there, became one and pretended to be one. And then ended up turning his back on them because he didn't care about them. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of how that got there. So
yeah, sure. So the one thing that I remember very vividly when we were talking about Theo's character originally, right, when we were on was one of the camping trips, I believe, we were talking about, I was talking through faith as an attribute, and you were like interested in that because of the stuff that it could give you. do you want to talk about that a little bit? I remember us talking about, what happens when you reach 10 faith in Burning Wheel. Well, you transcend to be in the same realms as the gods are. And I remember talking to you about that. And I think if I remember correctly, wasn't your original motivation for giving Theo faith basically I want him to end up as a god?
Yeah, I think that's part of his selfish nature. It's not necessarily selfish where he's going to betray people. He still is about honor and glory. And that's kind of why he doesn't care about dying, because although he has nothing to lose, he's kind of I'm going to put it all on the line because, that's honorable. And he does want the glory, but I don't think he wants it to be better. He just wants it for, he thinks of that, he values honor and doing the right thing, in the moment, as opposed to this long drill thing. He kind of just sees this very vague idea of good and evil, or it's good is good no matter if if you're killing evil people, or and he wanted to transcend as a god because he thought that maybe that would be he kind of collect all these different things at the same time. He gained the power to basically influence other people, as a god, and transcend to get that honor and glory through almost a sort of death, or at least a physical death, just transcending to a god. And that kind of intermixes where, because he has nothing to lose, it brings up this fearless attitude, and it makes it easier for him to achieve just his glory. So it's almost like earthly things have very little value other than honor and truth. And so he doesn't value his life in the sense where he's not going to throw it away, in the sense where he'll do something dishonorable, but he'll do whatever he can to achieve that goal. And so that's kind of it's almost like his backup thing. Originally it was oh yeah, you want to settle down with a nice girl, but then everything went out the window, and now he's just I want to be so powerful where I can punish basically people who are doing evil, and because he kind of just values that evil and that good, and so he sees himself as a means to get to that way of punishing people.
Yeah. So in the actual Burning Wheel rules, what it says in that chapter is, it says when a priest's faith exponent reaches 10, he's become too holy and powerful to walk this plane. No longer can he be concerned with the small struggles and toils of men. Suddenly his eyes are forced open to a wonderful and awful panorama. It is into this divine spectacle he steps and forever leaves the world of the living, gone to join his God. And so obviously that looks different for Theo, because Theo is using his faith in the gods as a means to an end. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. He's using it as a means to an end because he doesn't necessarily care about them, but he knows that they can get him where he wants to be. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of is okay, I got to put all of it's not necessarily trust. I mean, you could separate trust and faith. He has faith in them because they're the only ones who can do it. And he knows he can't do it on himself, but he doesn't care about the gods themselves.
Yeah, and I think that works in the setting that we're playing in. So the world of Saragon, the gods are very, fickle Greco-Roman pantheon style gods. And so I think that sort of motivation still works in this setting, because you're doing what the gods want you to do too, right? There's a give and take here. There's a symbiotic relationship where they're giving you power and they're also manipulating you to do the things that they want you to do.
Yeah. He and I think he knows that, but he's just kind of I'm going to brush it off because they're the way I get right there. And I don't trust them that they're going to be do the nice thing, do the, what we would consider the right thing. They're going to be oh yeah, I'm just going to be generous and gracious. Yeah. It's no, I'm just going to do what they do, even though I know that they're probably going to be manipulating me or try to manipulate me. And it's just you know what, in the end, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't trust them, but they're the way I get there. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So what for you playing Theo, right? What was it like for you in general? What were some of your favorite parts about playing Theo? Just as a player, what was it like?
I think I really like the lone wolf side of him. Yeah. He's kind of trying to do this thing. I love the idea of him just being charge the battlefield, just drop his weapon. I'm just going to charge in. His fearlessness, I think that was my favorite part. I love just doing things spontaneously, and although it didn't always go well, sometimes it just completely failed. I loved him just do it. Even if he was injured, be I'm just going to do it, and then you just keep failing, and it's but I love the ability for him to just not be afraid. And I think that was, although I failed a lot, I feel it got me. it was just kind of fun to be able to just conjure up the sort of courage and just be like, yep, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
maybe I won't,
sure.
maybe I'll die, maybe I won't. But, and I also like the inner turmoil that's going on with him, because I feel like although he has these set of values, it's kind of like there's a part of him that wants to not be that way. Like there's a part of him that actually wants to be a genuine person and actually be on this earth and not be so, like impulsive, like to not be that way. It's almost like it's like a voice inside of his head, like that's like his wife, where his wife was kind of like brought him down to earth and made him like value things that are good, but in a sense where it's kind of like his wife kind of contradicted him in a way where kind of calmed him down and made him like settle down and be like, okay, maybe you should think out these things. So maybe the other was around you, maybe being honorable would be doing something that kind of conflicts you for somebody else that maybe you care about, like Connor's character, like or something like that. Like he sometimes in the story where he kind of saw somebody who's like maybe like almost like reminded him in a term in the sense of their values of his wife, because his wife was very dedicated. His wife was very calm, was very collected, and he'd see that in other people and be like, there's almost like a little tiny voice where he's like, it's not really necessarily affecting him, but it's like it's almost like trying to convince him to be otherwise. Yeah. And so he's kind of has an internal like, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should. And he's like, but he wants to, there is a part of him that wants to be it because it's his voice, it's his wife's character who no longer exists, but influencing him, or the influence she did make on him.
Yeah, for sure. And where we are in the game so far, I remember, we can talk about this because it's already happened. Episode 3 specifically has a lot of really good moments for Theo because, he starts the whole session praying to the gods for the first time, doing faith for the first time in the game, to try to like get answers, and he doesn't get any. And like the whole session it keeps going, and you keep praying to the gods, they still don't give you answers. And then you have the whole moment where like you go to like make sure, because everybody's talking about like they're going to go kill the abbess. You're like, okay, I'm going to make sure that she's okay or whatever. And you ride over there and you have this whole moment. And it's honestly, it's a very fun Theo moment and a fun Adam moment, because like you're standing on the wall and this guard's like, no, I'm not going to let you pass. Like, there's no reason for you to go into the abbey right now. Like, why are you doing this? And you scale the wall in the rain. And you try to do it stealthily, but the guard sees you, and then like you're wrestling with the guy, and I remember you saying basically like, I'm like, the guy tries to tackle you, and what you say back to me is like, I like struggling to get off of him, and just like, I just want to go talk to the nun. And it's just like it's such a funny moment for Theo, because like he doesn't really think through the craziness of what he's actually doing. He's just like, he has a goal and he's going to do it. Even And that's also a very you thing. Right. But then of course
he do anything at all costs. And he's like, I don't understand. Like, why can't you just let me do my goal? Why do you have to get in the way? Yeah. This doesn't concern you.
Yeah. And then of course we have the capstone of that moment in the episode where you pray the last time, and Narani is like, okay, this is too far. I have to punish you, and then strikes you with lightning.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of those sorts of moments in Crow Inquisitors on all of the seasons that we played so far, where just Theo has a goal, he goes for it at all costs, and he pays some prices on the way to do it. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun to just see you as a player. What's the word I'm looking for? So passionately engaged with the mechanics of the game of the Burnt Wheel, because it's so focused around those sorts of character motivations. You naturally, I mean, just took to that and understand, okay, beliefs, instincts, traits, like these are the things that define my character, and I'm going to play to those. And you got a lot of fate and persona as a result, because you're just like, all right, here's my goal, I'm going to do it no matter what. And yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I think that's the best, representation of who he is, was just to keep doing those, because it was like, he doesn't, like I said, he has like one long-term goal, and it really doesn't have much to do with like a long-term life goal. It's just like who I am. It doesn't matter, again, that transcendence, or like what there's like the short-term goals, like the really short-term goals, which is like the spontaneous, but he knows that the little tiny goals where he just, exemplifies himself to get to that larger goal.
For sure. Yeah. Real quick, I just kind of I'm looking through like your skills and stuff here as a character. You had an interesting skill set here because you were kind of like a mix between Theo Alphonse and Dylan in some ways, right? Because Dylan's like fight, just do fighting. And he has a little bit of religious stuff going on. And then Alphonse is like, I'm going to talk to everybody and convince them to do what I want. You have the skills etiquette, observation, persuasion, noble wise, conspicuous, trident, and brawling, a little bit of arena wise, and then doctrine. Right. So you're kind of a mix between those two characters in a lot of ways, but it never really felt that way because you have such a different feel. Theo has such a different feel from Dylan and Alphonse in the way they handle situations, right? Like even though Dylan he has a really good sword skill and he'll use it, he's nowhere near as impulsive as you are, right? As Theo is, because of the particular discipline that he has as a warrior. It's just interesting to see like the way that a character that has very similar skills to other characters in the game can still feel incredibly different because of the way that they're played, through beliefs and instincts and all that stuff too. And going off of that thing right there, what was it like? Do you remember anything in particular about like what it was like for Theo to interact with the other characters? Like for you as a player, do you remember any particular moments in general of like things that stood out to you as fun interactions, the way that your character fit into the dynamic of the party?
I think my character knew how to interact with different people the way they are best interacting. Like, because I think being like the son of a merchant, he knows how to like talk to and respond to different people of different types of like backgrounds. And I think that he kind of grew through the circumstances of his life where it's kind of like changing. He went from nobility to all of a sudden nothing and then something again, and then goes into clergy. It's like he went from rich to poor to victorious to religious guy. So it's like he really knows how to interact with, like, I think deep down Theo had a liking for what was Connor's character,
Cantarius.
Cantarius, because he just had like a respect for him, and he kind of wanted, and he knew that it's almost like he knew what kind of person different people were. And I think he was, because of his spontaneity and his like vigor to do things, was kind of collided to this kind of like adventurous kind of person where, he is just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do this because for the moment, I'm going to capture the excitement of this moment. And so when he does that, he can interact with, Dylan's character, or, he has some, like, it's almost like a jack of all trades. He has experience where it's all different things. It's not necessarily like what you can do, but like knowledge of how to interact with people. And I think some of my favorite moments were probably with Cantarius. I think. I think that it's almost like he didn't like, was Dylan's character the one who was the fighter?
Yeah, Dylan was the holy knight. Yeah.
I think he kind of had like a spite for him, just because he was like, it almost like he reminded him too much of himself, in the sense where he's like, no, we want to battle. It's like,
this is like the goody two shoes version of me. That's what Theo.
Yes, exactly. Right. Like, it's like, you want to go too far to one side, but I know that I'm like you in the sense that I like, I battle, but I'm not like concerned about what other people think of me in that sense. And where like, oh, that was crazy. It's just like, in the end, he's like an entertainer. That's the thing, is like not necessarily where he wants people to like him for the honor and glory. And he doesn't, and even if it's dramatic and sometimes like shocking, like, oh, that wasn't the noble thing to do, he still get, people are like, oh, I kind of like that. It's not normal. You would think that you'd be like this very proper person, even, because
it's provoking no matter what. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And he likes to provoke the crowd, no matter, and he sees the two far ends of himself, and he's like, either you're too religious and too concerned about what the gods or, the clergy or whatever thinks of you, or you're too concerned about being proper fighting etiquette, or just straight up battle. It's like, no, it's like there's the fun side of the battle, or the, the glory, the craziness of it. And then there's the crazy, the intersecting craziness of both sides. I think that's where he kind of wants to be.
Yeah, and what you mentioned there is actually really interesting, just about the way he interacts with the characters, because I think you're right. I think like Theo, playing off of his kind of go with the flow attitude, he does kind of meet the other characters where they are in a lot of scenes, to just interact with them on their own basis, right? So like when he talks to Cantarius, and we don't really have a whole lot of this so far in Crow Inquisitors, but later on for sure. We have lots of good moments with Theo and Cantarius, who they both understand each other's kind of like drive, right? Their seriousness in the drive, because even though Theo has moments, and he especially right away hits it off with Alphonse right away in the first season of Crow Inquisitors, because of that kind of spontaneity that both of them have. Right, there's that side of him, but then there's the other side, like the serious driven side, that while Alphonse shares some of those, especially later on, Cantarius really understands you in that sense, right? Like the drive to have one overriding goal in your whole life that completely overtakes the way you interact with everything. And you guys have a lot of good moments on that front too. I don't remember exactly. Obviously, you and Dylan don't really get along most of the time. I don't know if Theo and Antonius really had any like particularly evocative moments together. I don't like they obviously are teammates and stuff, and they work together pretty well. But like, I don't know if there was anything quite like he had with Cantarius or Alphonse.
No, I think I wanted to mention about Alphonse. I think Alphonse, he kind of saw the similarity, but I think Alphonse was too kind of.
He wasn't serious enough.
He enjoyed living too much. I feel like, because like I said, Theo kind of has like a sad background. So in the end, he's kind of like this lone wolf, and he doesn't necessarily want the side where just people to generally like him, like women, or, he just kind of like wants people to see him as like, whoa, that dude, like, he knows what he's doing. Like I almost like a respect for an entertainer, where it's like, although, I feel like Alphonse was more just like an entertainer. Like people just loved him because he was silly. And I think Theo just kind of like loved to, he's like, yeah, you get it. Except you're just too happy about it. I just like it for like the honor and like the grit of it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
There wasn't Antonius. No, there wasn't much. I think it was just kind of like, he could have interacted with him, or he could understand him, but it wasn't necessarily his crowd. And I think he just kind of saw him as a background character. Not that, that's what
that actually kind of is funny, because like, in a lot of ways, Antonius kind of is. He is the only character in Crow Inquisitors as up to this point that hasn't gotten like his moment in the sun in the same way that a lot of the other characters have. Obviously, second season, he has a lot of stuff going on with him for sure. Yeah. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like Theo probably definitely sees himself as the hero of the story.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
I think that's
whether or not he is.
Like there's this. Yeah. He feels like he interacts with these characters, and he's like gonna do the big thing in the end that the hero wins. Like he's gonna have that downfall where it's like everything seems hopeless, and he constantly has those battles where it's like, oh, everything's hopeless. He gets beaten. He gets, he loses a fight, or he loses faith. And it's just kind of like a roller coaster. And then in the end, he's going to come back, glory in the end, and win. And I think that's kind of what he sees. He's like, oh, this is just another downfall. I'm going to come back up. And then at the end, that's it. That's where he's going to be. He's going to just big bang at the end, a collision, the climax of his story. And he definitely sees himself as like the hero.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting too, because I feel like Theo, in a way that the almost and none of the other characters in Crow Inquisitors is sort of not grim and depraved in the same way. And what I mean by that is, like, Dylan, Alphonse, Antonius, and Cantarius are so dark characters, right? Even Alphonse, who is the comic relief in a lot of senses, he's a horrible human being, right? He's done horrible things in his life.
Yes.
And obviously Theo has too, but in a way that is honestly, it's just the way his character is framed. It's less dark than the way any of the other characters are framed, because he kind of just goes along with the moment. And in some ways that's terrifying, because he could do something horrible and not feel bad about it because he doesn't think it through. But in another sense, he's not the sort of meticulously manipulative person that Alphonse is, right? And so there's a bit more innocence in some senses in a campaign like this, where the whole thing is like criminals who have been given another chance of redemption. Theo has a particular innocence about him that's only possible for someone like he is, who's as spontaneous enough to not think through his decisions. There's a disaster to that for sure.
Yeah, I think in a way it's almost like naivety or ignorance. And he kind of like enjoys it. He's like, if I think too much about it, then I would. But he knows that if he just kind of ignores it, he's not going to like suddenly have this huge moral dilemma. He's just kind of like, well, if I'm not I don't really care about that. Like, and so he's just like purposely ignorant so that he doesn't, he doesn't want to be ignorant, but he's just kind of like, well, if I think too much about it, then if I intentionally do something bad, then it's even worse. It's like, I see this glory, and if it ends up bad, well, sorry. But, so I think he acknowledges the fact that he is kind of ignorant about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just an interesting thing that I don't know if I've really realized about Theo until this moment. That's just kind of the way that he's framed. Cool. I mean, is there any other stuff that comes to mind for Theo that you want to talk about quick, or kind of run out of the questions?
I guess I mentioned earlier, I just thought of the friendship between Cantarius and Theo was kind of like, he was almost like a mentor to him, and he didn't like, he just kind of saw him like, it was just like it caught his eye, and he was kind of like, I really like Cantarius. I think deep down he's the opposite of Theo, where it kind of like he does think about everything he does, and he kind of isn't so ignorant about it. And he's kind of like, I think he sees him as a respectable character. Yeah. And kind of, I think early on they like make a friendship bond or something like that, or something like that.
It hasn't happened yet, but yeah, they're heading towards it right now with the way we are in Crow Inquisitors. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, it was great having you. Great talking about Theo. And I mean, the plan is to have a get together with everybody, whoever we can get, once the first season is completely out, the podcast is completely edited, everything's out, to do kind of like a post-mortem, like where everyone's listened to it and can talk about what it was
show
like.
Up with the trident.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Like, I'm here.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, this has been Crow Inquisitors. Thanks for coming on, Adam. And you'll be getting a new episode in 2 days as of the release of this. All right. Cool. That's it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.